Can video games teach you life skills, or are they just a giant waste of time? Today I'm playing Car Mechanic Simulator to see if you can learn to rebuild an engine using only what is taught to you in-game. We're then going to test to see if this engine will actually run, or if we're going to ruin an $800 engine. I'm actually a certified mechanic, and I want to use this engine in my 91 Honda CRX, so I'm hoping this game is pretty accurate. Starting off, everything was going smoothly.
Those up pancakes with mine.
I was taking my bolts off nuts, my nuts off bolts, but I quickly ran into a potentially big issue. I may be warping my engine, potentially ruining an $800 motor right from the start. Metal is soft, like way softer than you think. Just think about engines as paper clips that are way thicker. When you fasten two pieces of metal together with a bolt, they're gonna pinch down together under that bolt. Pretty much exactly how you would expect it. But then the metal will lift up around the area where it gets pinched together. You can kind of see this if you take a piece of paper and pinch it. If you were to fasten, let's say, the ends of two blocks of metal together, then fasten your way inwards, this bowing effect could force your metal to warp or even crack, resulting in unusable engine parts. Now, it doesn't matter as much for things like camshafts. I've literally never held camshafts before. I've rebuilt engines before, but they have all been single overhead cam engines, which basically means I've never had to take these off to get to these bolts that I need to get to. So this is kind of neat. This is sweet. We're learning here together, all of us, collectively. Thank you for being here for the ride. But removing the top of an engine from the bottom is a different story. Whenever I separate these two, if either the block or the head gets warped at all, they will never pair up properly again. It's game over, $800 down the drain. The way to properly take this off is to do a proper torque sequence and do a whole bunch of fancy smancy stuff, but the game doesn't teach us that. So I'm probably going to destroy this engine now. Let's just hope it starts up later. On top of potentially warping my $800 motor, I also stripped out one of my head bolts, had 3 of my bolts seize on me, and ruined one of the set of threads in the block. Video games are just a sterile laboratory example of the real world. In the real world, bolts will get seized up, metal rusts, and things break. Now I have an engine that needs to get sent to a machinist because of these issues. But the game doesn't have any of these issues, so instead of spending the money to fix it, we're just gonna ignore our problems and rebuild the engine as is. You can actually avoid ruining these head bolts specifically by 1, following the proper torque pattern, which is the same fix for the warpage, and 2, not using an impact to remove these bolts and instead using your own hand. When you work these loose with your grippers, you get a way better feel of what the bolt and socket is doing. So we may have ruined our motor, but there's a way to check and see whether or not we have yet. One of the biggest ways that you can check it is by getting a precision straight edge like this. These things are like $50 and it's just a stick of metal that's long. It's like a ruler that you would use in art class, except for it's been machined to like thousandths of an inch. So with this, what you do is you come over here to the head of the block, you lay it pretty much just across it like that, and then what you do is you take a flashlight and shine it underneath and see if you can see any light coming through. You can see there's like just a little bit of light coming through. That means that this is warped, which means that potentially we've screwed up a $1,000 engine. However, we're just gonna run it anyway. There's only a little bit of it. There's only a giant chunk of metal in this thing. Oh God. There's metal in it, look at that. Metal, yummy, yummy, yummy. Metal in an engine is never a good sign. Typically that means that something went wrong and broke, which I'm sure, as we all know, things that are broken are not good things. After finding metal in my engine, I went ahead and disassembled the rest of the motor. We pulled the main caps, crankshafts, and pistons, completing the teardown. Now that it's time for reassembly, there's a gigantic issue we're gonna run into with our pistons and their rings. Because this engine pumps air, the pistons need to be sealed shut. How can you seal shut a moving object? So this is how a piston is properly broken down. You have your top ring, which goes on the top, who'd thunk it. Your bottom ring, which goes second, not actually on bottom. Then you have have your oil ring. So sometimes oil will actually go up, and this is just to make sure that it doesn't do that. If you have a bad oil ring with the inside of your engine, you'll see a bunch of blue smoke coming out of the back. You've seen a lot of this happens with like old Hondas and Hoopties and old Chevys. So in a video game, they actually just kind of do the assembly for you. But the thing is that in real life, you kind of want to make sure that these are gapped properly. So if you look at these rings right here, there's obviously a big ass gap like that. And whenever you put this in a cylinder, it compresses and comes together. The way that you would normally check these is that you would pretty much just, what you do is you take the piston ring and you put it inside of the piston like this. And then from here, you literally just grab your piston just like this. And then you get up in there, press it down so that way it's in there evenly. I'm doing this dry, which is so not recommended. Then you take it out, and if you look down in there, teensy tiny little bitty bitty boy gap. So it's that little guy right down in there. That tiny ass little gap does actually allow for some of the compression to come in. But what we do is we actually wind up having two of these rings. One of the gaps will be on one side of the piston, the other gap will be on the opposite side of the piston, so that way if any compression is gonna come through, it has to go down, around, and then down, which is a lot of travel within the span of like the microseconds in which everything is happening. The other thing that we have to worry about is the size of that tiny little gap, because as metal heats up, it expands. As anything heats up, it expands, right? So if this is too tight, eventually that tip can touch and it can flex and it can break your shit. Normally put these piston rings in here like this and you check for that little gap with a feeler gauge. However, in the video game, it doesn't actually have any measurement tools to check that. So I actually don't even have any feeler gauges because I've lost mine, I guess. So I'm just gonna run this exactly how it is at a factory. Normally you would check it and then file it down. This is a incredibly integral part of your engine. Messing this up could literally destroy it. So yeah, hopefully this doesn't blow up my $1,000 motor. Now that it's time for reassembly, there's a gigantic issue we're gonna run into with our pistons and their rings. If I break literally any of these, I'm gonna be shit out of luck. And I'm gonna have to use some of the older piston rings, which isn't ideal, but I'm just gonna be careful and slow and see what I can do. Normally what you would do is that you would put some oil on this, so that way it could slide around, but the video game didn't do that, so we're not gonna do that. Just another one of the ways that this thing could fucking blow up on me. There's a roach at my foot. One very weird thing I'm noticing about these is that as you install these bearings, I think it's because these are so cheap, but whenever you actually scrunch this down, so if you watch, it'll actually bring up a whole bunch of metal shavings. I just dropped some down in there. See how it just like makes all this fucking metal shavings, dude? Like, that's so bad. Anyway, I'll just kick that into the engine, and that'll be future me's problem. That's what oil filters are for. No, that's not. Normally what you would do is that you would use assembly lube here to make sure that all of this stays lubricated, so that once this crankshaft starts spinning, it'll actually be lubricated and it will just go. Because whenever you crank these down on tight, it just kind of grips everything together, right? And because these are already dry as I installed it, these are not meant to move. So if I have left any grain of dirt, oil, grime, anything on the backside of this, it's gonna spin a bearing and it's gonna destroy my motor. So hopefully we don't need assembly lube and we'll be fine. We'll see. We'll find out. I can't get the engine to turn over, which is not good because in order to set timing to make sure everything runs in sync, I need these pistons to be top dead center. And the way that you normally do that is by rotating the crankshaft assembly. Yeah, because like as of right now, like, oh, never mind, it broke loose. Oh, never mind. I just gotta fucking that thing. All right, we're good. One of the big things I'm noticing so far is that there's no gaskets. There's fucking 0 gaskets anywhere on this thing that aren't physical. So what I mean by that, a physical gasket would look like this. Boom, this is a physical gasket. There's physical and liquid gaskets, where a liquid one may be a little bit misleading because a liquid gasket hardens just like a solid gasket. However, it gets applied like a liquid. You literally just get like a tube of toothpaste and just squeeze it out where you want the gasket to be. Then once all the liquid dries up, it's a solid gasket just like those. All right, so with this, we have 100% reassembled this engine exactly to manufacturer spec, how you're supposed to Yeah. So the question is, how do we know whether or not this engine works? Well, there's a couple of different ways that we can do it. The way that I'm going to be doing it is called a compression test. A compression test is basically a test to see whenever these pistons come back up, how much compression is actually being held. If you have a high level of compression, that means more than likely your engine is good. However, if you have a low level of compression, that means it's leaking somewhere, which is not a good thing whatsoever. Without any gaskets to keep the fluid from coming out of the engine, we were most likely gonna make a big mess and potentially ruin this motor again. Man, look at this. Look at this. I know my lighting's terrible right now, but like, I found a kit with all new hardware in it for the transmission. I fucking love new hardware. It's the best thing ever. Look at this. Look at it, all shiny. There's no rust on this. It's just good. With fluids like oil and coolant leaking out from the engine, there's nothing to keep it lubricated or cooled down. And without lubrication or cooling, it's gonna destroy itself. Hopefully at this stage of the game, the engine isn't completely ruined and I can just go back in and fix some of these problems. If it's beyond repair, then I won't be able to use this for my car. By the way, before we actually test this engine, I've been saying this engine is about $800. It's actually more like $1,100 to $1,200. So here's to hoping it's not broken. Immediately, my engine started spitting in my face. All right, now that there's oil all over the floor, let's make some shit spark. So the way that this works is that basically we just shove this little tube thingy into the engine. And then on here, this little device right here is what's gonna actually read everything. So I'm gonna leave this right here. We're gonna turn over the engine with the starter. Everything's gonna spin and compress, and that's gonna give us all the readings that we need. Oh, this is fucking terrifying though. Because basically I'm kind of just welding right now. And if I don't do this right, I'm gonna f my shit up. And I don't have money to replace any of this right now, so let's see. Wow, some slag just shot in my face. But yeah, I think you guys see the risks now. So this one was about 78 PSI, which is not great considering you typically want these things to be like 100 at the very least. So let's just test the other three, see if they're good. And if they're not, then I wasted $1,000 on an engine. All right, cylinder number 2. We got a nice 80 that time. All right, little improvement. We got our first 90. So my battery's dying, but we got 70 on that one, which is really bad. So reading my pressure gauge with the big differences in PSI and how low everything is, it's very apparent that I have wasted $1,000. If I try to repair this on my own, it's gonna cost several $100s, if not over $1,000 to fix it. So what I'm probably gonna do is I'm probably just gonna buy a lightly used one and go from there. So can video games actually teach you how to rebuild an engine from scratch? I would say kind of. We don't not have an assembled motor that spins and has some compression, right? I think it's really good for like getting a fundamental understanding of how these engines work. You might be able to use a game like this for like somebody who's just starting off working on mechanic stuff, because the game really does give you a really good fundamental understanding of how all of this works. I think with just a little bit of coaching, you very easily can build an engine from scratch, and we live in the age of information, man. Just hop on YouTube. I guarantee you there's a tutorial on how to build whatever engine you're working on to the T already on YouTube. If I get 1,000 likes on this video, I will rebuild the entire car from scratch, but I'm not doing it for any less than that. I'll give you guys 30 days to hit it. Aside from that, I love you guys. Y'all be safe. No, my crock, it got on the oil. Oh.